Welcome to the History and Heritage podcast with me, Liam Blake. Join me as we uncover hidden stories and insights that shaped our world. From mysteries to legacies, join us on this journey through time. There's a story behind every Irish surname, but few carry as much history, contrast and endurance as the name Blake. It's a name that has walked two roads at once, from Norman Wales to the quays of Galway, from English manors to Cromwell's navy, and across oceans to every corner of the world. The story of Blake is one of language and lineage, faith and defiance, a single name that came to stand for both the power of England's empire and the perseverance of Ireland itself. Even in the sound of it lies a kind of paradox. In Old English, Blek meant dark, while Blake meant pale. Two words, almost identical in sound, yet opposites. To be a Blake was to be defined by contradiction. A name that began as a simple description but came to hold a far greater story. One of light and dark, faith and power intertwined. The earliest Blakes appear in 12th century England. A Walter le Black was recorded in Devon in 1167, and others soon after in Cambridgeshire and Buckinghamshire. These were ordinary men marked by appearance, perhaps dark-haired or even fair-haired, but they would give rise to families of rank and renown. Some historians even trace echoes of the name to Norse settlers from a place called Blaker in Norway, hinting at an even older northern thread to the lineage. Around the same time, another Blake story was taking shape across the Irish Sea. Following the Norman invasion of 1169, a Welsh Norman knight named Richard Cadell, known by his nickname Le Black, meaning the dark one in his case, arrived in Connacht. Rewarded for his service under Prince John, he acquired land near Galway at Kilturrogue and Ballymacroe. By 1290 he was Portreeve of Galway, and in 1303 Sheriff of Connacht. His descendants dropped the Cadell name and adopted Blake as their own, establishing the Irish branch that would define the city's life for centuries. The Normans who came to Ireland often changed not just their names, but their loyalties. The French Le Black softened into Irish speech as my surname de Bloca. The Gaelic world, ever quick to baptise outsiders with new meaning, heard in the name an echo of O Bláthvich, descendant of Bláthvich, a word that meant son of flower. It was a coincidence, but had caught hold, helped along by the memory of a saint. Bláthvich of Iona, born around 750, was a noble Irish monk who died for the faith. When Viking raiders stormed Iona around 825, demanding to know where St. Columba's relics were hidden, Bláthvich refused to betray them. He was cut down at the altar, and his body later buried on the spot. His Latin biographer, the monk Strabo, called him Florentius, the flowering one, which was a translation of his Irish name. The connection between Bláthvich and Blake has long been dismissed by linguists, but the moral link is harder to deny. Both stories speak of courage, of standing firm under pressure, and of faith that endures through darkness. Back up to the 14th century, and the Blakes of Galway had become merchant princes, one of the famed 14 tribes who ruled the city through trade and office. Their ships crossed Spain and Portugal, exporting hides and fish, returning with wine and silk. They built churches and castles, and their names filled civic roles. John Blake was mayor in 1487, the first of many Blakes to hold the Mayor of Galway post. Their estates, Menlock, Ardfry and Ballyglunin, rose above the Corrib as symbols of wealth and endurance. Norman by blood, Catholic by faith and Irish by heart. Then came the trials. The Reformation divided the islands, and the Blakes remained loyal to Rome. When Cromwell arrived in the 1650s, that loyalty cost them pretty much everything. Menlock Castle was burned, their lands confiscated, and their family scattered. Some fled abroad to serve in the armies of France and Spain, and became known as the Wild Geese. Others endured quietly under the penal laws, and their faith outlawed, but unbroken. They found new purpose in small acts of defiance, teaching children in hedge schools, supporting local priests, and keeping the Catholic flame alive even when it was dangerous to do so. Their heraldry summed up their character. A silver shield crossed by a red fret, symbolizing unity through hardship, a mountain cat striding forward for watchfulness, and beneath it all, the motto, Virtus sola nobilitas, virtue alone ennobles. It was more than a family slogan. It was a statement of belief in an age where nobility had little to do with blood and everything to do with endurance. Across the Channel, the English Blakes lived a very different story. They were Protestant landowners and officers, the establishment that the Irish branch resisted. Robert Blake of Somerset, born in 1598, rose to become one of England's greatest admirals. Serving Cromwell, he built the fleet that secured Britain's command of the seas, defeating the Dutch and Spanish. He was buried in Westminster Abbey, honoured for the same cause that had destroyed his Irish counterparts. A century later came another famous Blake, William, the poet and artist, born in London in 1757. He rebelled not with weapons, but with vision, seeing angels and trees of Peckham Rye, and finding eternity in the ordinary. His art and poetry carried a spiritual defiance every bit as fierce as that of his Irish namesakes. Two men, one with cannons, one with a quill, each reshaping the world in their own little way. Meanwhile, back in Ireland, the Galway Blakes kept rebuilding. Sir Valentine Blake was granted a barony by James I in 1622, while others rose through the church. Anthony Blake became Catholic Bishop of Armagh in the mid-1700s. Their fortunes waxed and waned, but their name held its weight through famine, exile, and reform. By the 19th century, the Blakes, like so many Irish families, had spread far beyond Ireland's shores. Some fled hunger, others sought opportunity. Walter Blake, not to be confused with Walter LeBlanc from earlier, was among the early settlers in Virginia in 1624. Edward Blake became Premier of Ontario and leader of Canada's Liberal Party, and James and Stephen Blake were transported as convicts to Australia in the late 1700s. The name that once ruled Galway now appeared in ship lists and parish ledgers from Newfoundland to New South Wales. And yet, even as it travelled, it left new marks at home. In 1752, a Cork horseman named Edward Blake raced from Buttevant to Doneraile, County Cork, church steeple to church steeple, giving the world its first steeplechase. A small moment perhaps, but full of that same mix of daring and faith that defined the name. By the early 20th century, Blakes could be found across the empire. Henry Arthur Blake, born in Mayo in 1840, rose through the British colonial service to govern Hong Kong, Newfoundland and Jamaica, an Irishman serving the very empire that had once dispossessed his family. It's a fitting symbol of how intertwined those histories became, rebellion and service, faith and pragmatism, forever colliding within one surname. Today, the Blake surname remains scattered across continents. In 2014, there were nearly 95,000 Blakes in the US alone, 27,000 in England, and thousands more in Ireland and Australia. In Jamaica, it ranks among the top 50 most common names, a reminder of the colonial crossings that shaped both peoples. And yet, in Galway, where the Corrib meets the sea, the story still feels alive. The ruins of Menlock Castle stand over the river, Ballygleneen Station, once part of their estate, appeared in The Quiet Man, a quiet echo of a world both lost and remembered. When you walk these banks today, you can almost hear the layers of that name: the Norman knight, the Iona monk, the admiral, the poet, and the emigrant, all folded into one lineage that never stopped adapting. Linguists may say that Blauvik and Blake share no true origin, but perhaps they share something deeper. The monk who chose faith over fear, and the families who endured conquest and exile, all stand for the same truth, that nobility is not inherited, but earned. Blake's story is Ireland's in miniature. Faith and conquest, light and dark, loss and renewal. Proof that history's deepest contradictions can still produce hope. Their motto captures it best: Virtus sola nobilitas. Virtue alone ennobles. Not ancestry, not empire, but the courage to endure, to rebuild, and to remain. I'm Liam Blake, and this is the History and Heritage Podcast. Thanks for listening. And join me next time as we continue our Surname series, exploring the names that made Ireland and the Irish who carry them far beyond her shores.